Okay, so we are entered the exhibition Designing Places, Naming History, Naming Places, Designing History, which is part of Fotograf Festival. And my name is Tereza Rudolf. Here is also Anna Voswinckel, with whom I have curated this festival, and we are missing the third curator, Stefanie Kiwitt. So a little bit about this exhibition. It should be somehow about the public space, but because the festival is called Uneven Ground, nerovný terén, so we were trying to focus on the spaces where we are meeting or we are not meeting, because there are some restrictions, so the encounter cannot happen actually. So all these works we will go through today are somehow related to this border between public and private maybe, and the restrictions that are given now in nowadays society and political situation. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so starting maybe with this first work on the wall. It's a work by Irish artist Bernadette Keating. The title is Líne. It's a Gaelic word for line. Bernadette Keating was photographing farmland near her hometown in Ireland, and the work is very much about the borders between public and private. So she refers to the moment when public land is privatized by enclosing it through a border, and precisely she refers to the enclosure movement in the 18th century in Ireland as part of the capitalist development. So Bernadette Keating is working with photography, video and text. And in this exhibition she has two different works. Apart from this Líne, she realized this installation of small plates that are made of cast iron, and engraved in these plates are slogans of companies that own certain private spaces in this city of London mainly, which she worked a lot about this phenomenon of privatized spaces in the city. And the title of the work is Not All Battle Cries Are Meant to Be Heard, which refers to the term slogan, which is also a Gaelic old word that derives from military language, which means battle cry. So these slogans mean, or what she's referring to is that these companies are taking public space in a kind of invisible way, so we don't notice it, and these plates are an attempt to make it visible.
Yeah, and when you actually go through the writings, it's quite ironic what is written there. It actually goes exactly against what is happening. Like if I would read one, for example, we create extraordinary and sustainable places for reinvent being together. So, of course, it's a bittersweet irony, kind of. Yeah. And, well, we can maybe move to the other work.
Yes. This installation is by Eiko Grimberg. He's a Berlin-based German artist who studied in Leipzig and who works similar to Bernadette Keating with text, photography, video, and is realizing these sort of visual essays, as he calls them. He's researching mostly on phenomena of architecture and public space. And in this work, The Pool is the title. He works around a certain space within the city of Moscow in the center, which used to be the space where a church was standing, Orthodox church. Then after demolition, the Soviets meant to build the Palace of the Soviets at that site, which was never realized. But building ground then in 1958 was decided to turn into a swimming pool, like a public pool, which was also heated. And it was a center of recreation within the city. And it was also a symbol somehow for the period of the thaw, which with this heated water, you know. And after the fall of the Iron Curtain, the space was again overwritten and is now being used also as a church or gathering place.
Yeah, so also in the actually other like presentations, he sort of took a walk around this place right now in the Moscow and like documented the area around it. It's some sort of like visual archaeology of space. So actually it's like all related here to this particular place in Moscow. And it's interesting because actually you can see through the images that he took that there are still some like fragments that are referring to what used to be there, and it's not there anymore. So still you can actually find some sort of visual materials around.
And what is also interesting about this installation setting here, that he chose to open the doors to the outside, so the outside becomes somehow a part of the whole installation, the public space or the architecture that we see outside, which is kind of interesting. On photographs it looks like it's another projection, but it's actually real.
And then the rest of the exhibition continues in the second floor, so we can try to get there. So here we move to the second floor of Dům fotografie exhibition, where there are several other pieces. We can start with the one by Czech artists of younger generation, Martin Netočný. His video is called They the Slavs. It's interestingly linked to a BBC series, documentary series from 1985, which was called The Slavs. And this documentary by BBC was actually observation where Czech, or not only Czech, but Slavic tribes and the Slavic history was narrated in a way where people are sort of being observed as some animals in aquarium from the distant point of narrator. And Martin Netočný, he kind of used again this sort of focus. So focusing from distance, but he focused on a building development site in Prague, in Stodulky, where he is observing how this space is being made, and he is observing the people who is building it, which are usually people from East Europe, so East Slavs. And he's sort of commenting on this economical distribution of wealth, of economics, because this development is financed by people who are holding their accounts in Moscow, but people who works there are usually people from Eastern Europe, and people who will probably buy these very expensive apartments will be probably some Czech or another Slavs who will actually take a mortgage, because it's impossible to buy such a flat, even though this kind of settlement is on the suburb, but still. So he is also naming, and it's important, his position as a viewer and commenting on his own situation. When we move to work, to neighboring work of Martin Netočný, which is again a video by Czech artist Zbyněk Baladrán. This video was made already in 2005, so it's 15 years old, and back then it was made for a quite prestigious Czech prize, Cena Jindřicha Chalupeckého, prize of Jindřich Chalupecký. And this video is somehow looking back to the past. Zbyněk Baladrán, as usually, he works with found footage. But what is the basic idea of this work is like reading again or rereading Communist Manifesto. But what is important in Zbyněk Baladrán's video is some sort of a connection, not direct, but connection to the public space. It means how the public space is made, who is making public space, on what are the forces behind for formation of the public space. So, and as he said, somehow in a very young Czech Republic in early 90s, freedom or democracy was connected for many people with capitalism, and that's something that need to be probably reformulated nowadays, as we see how the public space is kind of taken away from people. So his movie Sociofiction is partly a fiction, and it's important because it's based on a fictional novel by Karel Honzík, and the speculation is in imagining that humans would actually not evolved from apes, but from squirrels. And the speculation is about how the society would be different or would look different. From Zbyněk Baladrán, we move to a video by Gabrielle Stetzer, who is German artist, originally East German artist, and her movie actually came from this period of late 80s, where GDR, East Germany, was still a socialist republic, and it was similarly impossible or difficult to do some independent artwork. And this work we are watching right now, where people are dancing like with some crazy, we would call it contemporary dance, but with some crazy movements on street and public space. It's 13 people who were asked by Gabrielle Stetzer to dance themselves to an ecstasy, which was some sort of rebellion against that time politics and also that time usage of public space. So some things were impossible to show or to do in public, and she wanted to go against this trend. And also this sort of dance could be historically related to Sanvitis dance, which was like medieval kind of dance in public space, where people were really through dancing throwing themselves in some ecstatic movement. This architecture is some sort of barrier we cannot pass through or just partly. It's important for us, and it was used in several other places of Fotograf Festival. It should be some sort of grid, which refers to modernism, but it's not so organized as it should be. And on the other side of this huge room in the Fotografie, there is the last video by American artist Shelly Silver. And this video is called 5 Lessons and 9 Questions about Chinatown. And it's one of her older videos from 2009. And she is actually observing one particular place, Chinatown in New York City. And again, she's using this observation technique from distance to see something that is not usually visible to someone who is not part of the community. And community plays a very important role here, because she is observing how this particular place has changed through hundreds of years or through several generations. So she's showing how this space developed and how it's still developing. And the most important or critical point is, of course, the critique of gentrification, which comes later in this movie, which is something we are witnessing with the public space or some parts of towns quite often nowadays. So maybe the main question of Shelly Silver is, to whom belongs a public space? Who is responsible for taking care of it? And this actually brings us back in some sort of loop to the work of Bernadette Keating, whose work is also referring to this unevenness, to this uneven access to public space, which was crucial for us in this exhibition, which is part of Fotograf Festival, Uneven Ground.